I want to say something that might make you uncomfortable, but that discomfort is exactly the point. You don't feel stuck because you lack talent. You don't feel restless because you're ungrateful. You feel this tension because a part of you knows you're outgrowing the life you're currently living. And growth, real growth, never arrives politely. It presses. It disrupts. It asks questions you'd rather postpone. Most people think their problem is lack of discipline or lack of motivation. That's rarely true. The real problem is avoidance. Avoidance of a decision. Avoidance of a truth. Avoidance of responsibility. You already know what needs to change. You just haven't said it out loud yet, and as long as it stays unspoken, it stays optional. Silence keeps doors half open. Clarity slams them shut and forces you to move. There's a moment in every meaningful life where excuses stop working, where the stories you tell yourself start sounding hollow. You can feel it when you say things like, one day, after this, or when the timing is right. Those phrases aren't plans. They're delays dressed up as wisdom. And delay has a cost. It doesn't show up immediately, but it compounds. It costs confidence. It costs self-respect. Eventually, it costs identity. Pay attention to what drains you. Not what exhausts you physically, but what exhausts you emotionally. The meetings that feel pointless. The routines that feel empty. The conversations where you edit yourself to stay acceptable. Those are signals. Not that you're weak, but that you're misaligned. Your energy is leaking because you're investing it in a version of life that no longer fits. Here's the truth most people never hear. You don't find clarity by thinking harder. You find clarity by committing, by choosing something and accepting the consequences. Clarity is earned through action, not contemplation. Waiting to feel certain before you act is backwards. Action creates certainty. Movement reveals direction. And yes, you might choose wrong. That's not a failure. That's feedback. What actually ruins lives isn't wrong decisions, it's undecided ones. Being permanently, almost ready, permanently preparing, permanently researching, while time keeps moving forward without asking for your opinion. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a standard. A line you refuse to fall below. A quiet promise to yourself that you will no longer tolerate a life built on autopilot. Once you raise that standard, your behavior will be forced to follow. Standards create structure. Structure creates momentum. A lot of people confuse potential with destiny. Potential is just unused capacity. Destiny is what happens when you take responsibility for turning that capacity into reality. No one owes you the opportunity to become who you could be. That responsibility is yours alone, and that's not a burden. That's freedom. Notice how often you wait for confidence before acting. Confidence is not the prerequisite. It's the byproduct. The people you admire didn't feel ready when they started. They felt compelled. There's a difference. Ready is comfortable. Compelled is unavoidable. If you're waiting to feel fearless, you'll wait forever. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that fear doesn't get the final vote. There will be moments where doing the right thing feels lonely, where choosing growth separates you from people who preferred the old version of you. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're changing. Not everyone is meant to come with you into the next chapter. Some people are chapters, not the whole book. Stop asking whether you're capable and start asking whether you're willing. Willing to be misunderstood. Willing to be bad at something before you're good. Willing to let go of identities that no longer serve you. Willing to disappoint others to avoid disappointing yourself. The future isn't built by people who wait for certainty. It's built by people who take responsibility for uncertainty, who look at an unclear path and say, I'll figure it out as I go. That mindset changes everything. It turns problems into puzzles. It turns fear into information. It turns setbacks into strategy. You are not late. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're early in the moment where awareness turns into action. But awareness without action becomes frustration. And frustration, left unchecked, turns into regret. Don't let that happen. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. Make the decision you keep postponing. Admit the truth you've been softening. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just honestly, calmly, clearly. The moment you do, something shifts. You stop drifting and start directing. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You don't need to feel ready. You need to move, even slowly, especially imperfectly. Momentum favors those who show up. Your life will not change all at once, but it will change the moment you stop lying to yourself about what you want and what you're willing to do to get it. That moment is always available. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. And once you choose clarity over comfort, responsibility over excuses, and action over waiting, you'll realize something powerful. You were never stuck. You were just undecided. If part one was about recognizing the tension, this part is about what happens after recognition, because awareness alone doesn't change a life. Plenty of people are self-aware and still miserable. Plenty of people know exactly what's wrong and do absolutely nothing about it. Awareness without responsibility turns into anxiety. Awareness without action turns into self-criticism. And that's where many intelligent, capable people get trapped. Once you see the gap between who you are and who you could be, you don't get to unknow it. You can distract yourself. You can numb it. You can stay busy. But the knowing stays. It shows up late at night. It shows up when you're alone. It shows up when someone else lives a life you secretly want. And that knowing will either become fuel or poison. There is no neutral outcome. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. You are not overwhelmed because life is too hard. You're overwhelmed because you're carrying too many unchosen obligations, too many silent agreements, too many paths you never consciously selected but somehow ended up on. Overwhelm isn't caused by effort. It's caused by misalignment. When your actions don't match your values, everything feels heavy. Simple tasks feel exhausting. Progress feels slow. Even success feels empty. That's not laziness. That's resistance. Your mind and body resisting a direction that doesn't make sense anymore. Most people respond to that resistance by trying to force themselves harder, more discipline, more routines, more pressure. But force only works short term. Eventually, something breaks. Burnout isn't the result of working too much. It's the result of working without meaning. You can do extraordinary amounts of work when you know why you're doing it. Without that why, even small effort feels unbearable. This is where responsibility comes in, not responsibility as guilt, but responsibility as authorship. The moment you stop seeing your life as something that's happening to you and start seeing it as something you are actively designing, the dynamic changes. You stop asking, why am I stuck? And start asking, what am I choosing to tolerate? That question is dangerous because it removes your favorite escape route, victimhood. Victimhood feels justified. It feels protective. It lets you be right without being effective. Responsibility strips that away. It says, maybe this isn't your fault, but it is your problem. And that shift is where power lives. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of what you're willing to accept. If your life feels smaller than your potential, look closely at what you're allowing, the conversations you avoid, the standards you lower, the habits you excuse, the truth you soften so you don't have to act. There's a quiet moment that defines whether someone grows or stagnates. It's the moment they realize that no one is coming to save them, not in a dramatic way, in a calm, almost boring way. No rescue, no permission slip, no perfect moment, just your choices and time moving forward regardless. Most people don't fail because they chose wrong. They fail because they never chose at all. They let inertia decide. They let comfort decide. They let fear decide. And then years later, they call the outcome fate. Fate is just the name people give to the consequences of unexamined decisions. If you want to change direction, you have to accept something first. The next version of your life will demand a different version of you. You cannot upgrade outcomes while keeping the same identity. The habits, beliefs, and patterns that got you here will not take you further. Holding on to them is understandable. Letting them go is necessary. This is where fear gets loud. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're threatening an identity you've lived inside for years. Even if that identity is painful, it's familiar, and familiarity feels safe, even when it's slowly suffocating you. Fear doesn't mean danger. Fear means transition. The problem is that fear doesn't announce that clearly. It just creates noise, doubt, overthinking, catastrophizing. Suddenly every risk feels enormous. Every mistake feels permanent. Every step forward feels reckless. And if you don't know how to interpret that signal, you'll retreat. But fear is not asking you to stop. It's asking you to prepare, to think clearly, to get specific. Vague fear paralyzes. Specific fear can be engineered around. Instead of saying, "This could fail," ask, "How exactly could this fail?" Instead of saying, "I'm scared of judgment," ask, "Whose judgment actually matters?" Precision turns fear into strategy. Another truth people avoid is this: you will lose people as you grow. Not because you become better than them, but because you become different. Growth changes priorities. It changes conversations. It changes what you tolerate. And not everyone wants to renegotiate the relationship. Some people benefit from the version of you that stays small. Some people are comfortable as long as you don't disrupt the dynamic. When you change, it forces them to confront their own choices, and not everyone wants that mirror. That doesn't make them bad. It just makes growth lonely at times. This is why independence of thought is so critical. If your sense of direction depends on constant approval, you will stall the moment approval disappears. And approval always disappears when you do something new. Innovation and validation rarely arrive together. Builders don't wait to be understood. They wait to be correct. Clarity matters more than confidence here. Confidence fluctuates. Clarity compounds. Confidence depends on how you feel. Clarity depends on what you understand. When emotions crash, clarity remains. It keeps you moving when motivation disappears. Clarity is built by asking hard questions and not rushing the answers. What problem am I actually trying to solve? What am I optimizing for? What does success look like if no one is watching? What am I willing to sacrifice? And what am I not? Most people never answer these questions honestly because the answers would require change. But avoidance has a cost. Every unanswered question quietly drains energy. The moment you get clear, life gets simpler, not easier, but simpler. Decisions take less time. Distractions lose power. You stop chasing things that don't align. Your calendar becomes intentional. Your energy stops leaking. And here's something rarely talked about. Clarity makes you dangerous in the best way, not loud. not aggressive, just hard to manipulate. When you know what matters to you, external pressure loses leverage. Trends lose pull. Comparison loses meaning. Comparison is a symptom of unclear values. When you don't know what you're building, you measure yourself against everyone. When you do know, you measure yourself against your own standards. Those standards become your anchor. They guide behavior even when no one is watching. Especially then, discipline stops being about willpower and starts being about identity. You don't force yourself to act. You act because that's who you've decided to be. This is where responsibility deepens. Responsibility isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about controlling effort, honesty, and consistency. You don't control whether you succeed. You control whether you show up prepared. You control whether you tell the truth. You control whether you learn from failure or repeat it. Failure isn't the opposite of success. Avoidance is. Every meaningful path includes moments where quitting feels logical, where the effort seems disproportionate to the reward, where progress feels invisible. These moments don't mean you chose wrong. They mean you're early. The early stages of anything important are quiet. No applause. No reassurance. Just work and doubt sharing the same space. This is where most people turn back, not because they can't continue, but because they expected confirmation before commitment. But confirmation comes later. Always. Think about how many lives are shaped by the fear of looking foolish. How many ideas die because someone didn't want to be seen trying. The irony is that the fear of embarrassment costs far more than embarrassment ever could. Regret lasts longer than ridicule. You don't need to be extraordinary to change your life. You need to be consistent and honest. Honest about what you want. Honest about what isn't working. Honest about the effort required. Stop negotiating with your future self. Stop saying, "I'll fix this later." Later is a myth people use to feel better about inaction. The only time you ever act is now. Every version of later is just another now you haven't reached yet. If something matters, it deserves present effort. Responsibility also means accepting trade-offs. You can't have every outcome. You can't keep every option open. Growth closes doors. That's not a loss. That's focus. Indecision feels safe because it keeps fantasy alive. Commitment kills fantasy and replaces it with reality. Reality is harder, but it's also where progress lives. At some point, you have to stop collecting information and start making decisions. Learning without application turns into avoidance. Preparation without execution turns into procrastination. You will never feel fully ready. Readiness is not a feeling. It's a decision. There's a version of you that exists only on the other side of action. You can't think your way into becoming them. You have to behave your way there. And yes, you'll make mistakes. You'll misjudge. You'll fail publicly or privately. But failure handled honestly becomes data. Failure avoided becomes fear. People who grow don't fail less. They recover faster. They adapt quicker. They tell the truth sooner. The future belongs to people who can course correct without losing momentum. Who can say, "This isn't working," without seeing it as a personal indictment. That requires separating identity from outcome. You are not your results. You are your standards. If your standards are high, outcomes improve over time. If your standards are vague, outcomes drift. Raise your standards quietly. Don't announce them. Don't defend them, live them. Choose one area where you stop compromising. One conversation you stop avoiding. One habit you stop excusing. Momentum starts small. You don't overhaul your life in one decision. You redirect it through a series of honest ones. And here's the part no one tells you. When you take responsibility seriously, life pushes back, not to punish you, but to test you. Resistance increases when you're moving towards something meaningful. That resistance is feedback, not a verdict. If you quit at the first sign of friction, you were never committed. Commitment shows up when things get inconvenient. The people who shape the future aren't more confident than you. They're clearer. They know what problem they're willing to suffer for. Every meaningful pursuit involves suffering. The question is whether that suffering is purposeful or wasted. Wasted suffering comes from avoidance, regret, and self-betrayal. Purposeful suffering comes from effort, growth, and responsibility. Choose your suffering wisely. At some point, you have to stop asking whether this path will work and start asking whether you're willing to do the work required if it does. Potential futures don't reward curiosity. They reward commitment. You don't need to see the whole path. You need to see the next honest step. Clarity at the next step is enough. Take that step, then reassess. Then take the next one. This is how lives change. Quietly. Incrementally. Relentlessly. Not through motivation. Not through inspiration. Through responsibility, clarity, and action repeated long enough to compound. You don't need permission to become who you know you could be. You just need the courage to stop lying to yourself and the discipline to act on the truth once you see it.